Now, with all my computer issues I was dealing with in the middle of this week, I was not able to go live for the Dynamite stream on Wednesday, but lucky you get my thoughts here instead, and I got a lot of them. First of all, they scored a big audience last week for their Beach Break episode, their biggest in at least 2 years, and they topped that for this week's show, so people obviously like what they saw. This was a poor follow-up to that, but also not as bad as some people made it out to be. I mean, to hear some people talk about it, this was the worst Dynamite of the year, this was the worst Dynamite in years. To me, it was not as good as Beach Break, but it wasn't terrible either. It was a pretty middle-of-the-road show. But at least when it was over, we actually had a redemption card. I was more offended by that. We had basically nothing announced for Redemption. And it's good that we have a card now because we are, we're a week out. We are now a week out from today. Coming into this episode on Wednesday, they had one match announced. That was it. Now we have, was it 7? I think we have 7 or 8. 8 matches announced. There was no MJF on this show on Wednesday, so it looks like he's clearly not even going to be on the Redemption card. More mind-boggling to me, though, not even so much as a mention of the fact that Hangman Adam Page, a 2-time AEW World Champion, making his return to Collision last Saturday. And they showed highlights from Collision on this episode of other things that happened. Hikaru Shida beating Harley Cameron, Mark Davis beating Speedball Mike Bailey. They never even mentioned Hangman being back after 4 months away. Even his return itself last Saturday was never promoted on Dynamite. It came in a tweet from Tony Khan a day or two before the show. Now, they mentioned him on Collision last night, but to not even mention something big like that on this show on Wednesday or show highlights, that is inexcusable. I have no words for that. Actually, no, I do have. Stupid, dumb, idiotic. Those are some of the words that come to mind. Now, they opened the show with Jon Moxley giving Will Ospreay a pep talk, but the key line here was telling him there will come a time where you have to make a difficult decision. And when that time comes, do not hesitate to pull the trigger no matter who the target is. So in other words, now that could have a double meaning, right? That could have to do with the match with Omega at All In. I know you're friends with him and you respect him, but again, you may have to pull the trigger. And if you want to win the world title, you're going to have to make a decision. Or there's going to come a time where Jon Moxley turns against him and Ospreay is going to have to fuck him up. And that's going to be the end of him and the Death Riders. I mean, I think we all know it's coming. We just don't know when, right? Does it happen at All In? Does it happen at Redemption? Because there's a new tag team match that's been announced. They're going to be wrestling the Young Bucks. Does it happen at All In? Does it happen after All In? I'll say after. And I think Moxley is going to end up being Ospreay's first challenger for the title. Adam Copeland and Christian Cage, they defended their AEW tag team titles against Daniel Garcia and Wheeler Yuta. And we have new tag team I'm just fucking with you. I mean, give me a fucking break. No, they had them beat the Death Riders C team to set up a title match for Redemption with the Death Riders B team in Claudio Castagnoli and Pac. Because they want to save that Young Bucks match probably for Wembley. So this gives them a team to beat in the meantime. Andrade El Idolo, he got the predictable win over Jake Doyle to claim his shot at Mark Davis in the national title at Redemption. So that was our second match made official for that show. Before the match in the back with Renee, Andrade said that he's making it his mission to beat every member of the Don Callis family and take every title from them before eventually winning the AEW World Championship, which means that Andrade will not be winning the AEW World title for another 2.5 years, given the rate of new members that we have with the Callis family. He's already knocked off Brian Cage and Jake Doyle, so only 18 more to go. Then we had the Kenny Omega World Championship celebration. Coming off of his big win at Beach Break over MJF, this included the Young Bucks coming out to take the beige MJF belt from him. Am I the only one who thinks it's kind of ridiculous? You listen to the announcers, and they're shitting all over the beige belt or calling it ugly or whatever they said about it. I actually think it's a pretty damn good looking belt. There ain't nothing wrong with the belt. I mean, you could shit on MJF if you want to. But them talking about the belt, you would think like, man, nobody wants to touch that thing. Even when he had the American title and they kind of got rid of the international title for a while, it was a good-looking belt. There's nothing wrong with the physical belt, but the Bucks were there, and they presented him instead with the traditional black AEW World Championship, which outside of the IWGP belt, this is still the second most gorgeous belt in all of pro wrestling right now, is the AEW World title. They definitely got it right with that belt. Now, I heard Dave Meltzer say that he thought that this was the best U.S. promo of Kenny Omega's career. If that is the case, what a sad commentary on the man's promo ability. If this is his best U.S. promo of his career. I thought he was fine, but this was hardly anything memorable from him on the microphone. He's not a great promo to begin with. He's really not that great. But it's been so long, he says, I can't even quote the actual number of days since I last held this championship, but he credits his friends and family and the fans, because without them, he would have given up on himself a long time ago. But here we are, less than 50 days until Wembley Stadium. As much as I would like to say that I'm ready, I've got work to do. And in 50 days, you're going to see the best version of Kenny Omega in AEW. So Will Ospreay interrupts, and he asks the Bucks if he and Kenny could have the ring to themselves. And Ospreay says it was very important that Omega believed in himself, bruv. And he was here to see Omega wrestle 25 minutes in that heat last week, never giving up on himself, bruv. Ospreay thought Omega was done after taking a belt shot, bruv. But then he kicked out at 1, bruv. Says the cleaner is back, the best bout machine is back, bruv. But for 10 years, Omega has been his hero and his inspiration, and he can only say thank you, bruv. Every time he steps in the ring with him, thank you. When Ospreay thinks of AEW, he thinks of Kenny Omega. It's all he's ever wanted was to be a fraction of what Omega is, but he's not satisfied of being second. Every week, they'll be out here showing everybody why they're in the position they're in a Wembley Stadium main event, AEW World title. Let's show them that this is where the best wrestle. And this is all fine and good for now, but this is going to get very old if we're still getting these types of promos 3 weeks from now. So if they're going to do babyface against babyface, I hope that they have a good plan to make things more interesting going into it, other than simply it's where the best wrestle. Later in the show, by the way, in the back, Jon Moxley told Kenny Omega, some people are who they are and can't pretend to be anything else, even if they try. If Moxley is going to plant ideas in Ospreay's head about Omega, while Omega is trying to convince Ospreay that the Death Riders are not his friends, that could be the catalyst for some tension between the two of them. That would be probably the best direction they could take, I think. That could turn out to be pretty interesting. But the interruptions were not done yet, because here comes the TNT champion, the Jet, Kevin Knight, who tells Ospreay he's got things to talk about champion to champion. And Omega said Ospreay can stay, and so he hung back in the corner, and Knight said, I'm still owed a title shot courtesy of Maxwell Jacob Fraudman. Says Omega is a god, but what's a god to a non-believer? And he issued a challenge for Redemption to a world championship match, to which the crowd began chanting, no! Now, look, I get he's a heel, but that's just hilarious to me. I would have been chanting the same thing, but for a very different reason. As in, no, there has to be a better match that you could come up with for the main event of this brand new pay-per-view that you're doing. Omega said Knight is trying to hold him accountable for a promise that MJF made. And I noticed something here. As he was talking in supposedly the best U.S. promo of his career, I noticed something that was kind of peculiar, which is that Kenny Omega cannot say the name Maxwell. Did you notice this? I thought he just flubbed his name the first time he said it, like he misspoke, but then he kept saying it the same way over and over, like another 3 or 4 times. Instead of saying Maxwell, it sounded like he kept calling him Maxiv or like Maxib. Very strange. I mean, at that point, just call him Max. Because you're going to try to hold me to his word? We're not going to do that. But maybe I'll give you a shot just because I'm a nice guy. Maybe because the first time I laid eyes on you, I saw something special. Someone who looked the part. Someone who was faster than everybody else and jumped higher. someone who was hungry. But that's where it ended, because Knight went and aligned himself with Don Callis, and Omega said he'd be a hypocrite if he told everyone that he never believed in what Don Callis was selling, because the last time he was world champion was thanks to Don Callis. It was during the coronavirus outbreak when no one was able to show up to celebrate, but he realized even if they could show up, they would not have. He didn't deserve for them to. And he told Knight, you don't need Don Callis. You could do this on your own. And Omega said, call MJF what you want, but he wasn't a fraud. He defended his title when he said he would. The only fraud that Omega sees is Kevin Knight. Deep down inside, the shit that Knight is spewing is not coming from the heart. Call him crazy, but he thinks there's a lot of good left in this man's heart, and you don't need a guy like Don Callis to beat Kenny Omega. But if it's going to be us at Redemption, he wants the Jet, Kevin Knight. He doesn't want Don Callis' bitch. You want to be Jet 2 belts? Do it on your own. And Knight said, well, one thing that you're wrong about, there's no goodness left in my heart, only greatness. And he smashed Kenny in the head with the microphone. Ospreay flew in for the hidden blade, but Knight ducked it and he bailed up the ramp. But then Darby Allin flew out and he attacked Kevin Knight on the ramp because those two are actually feuding right now. Brian Cage, he attacked Darby from behind. Here comes Rocky Romero and Trent Beretta, who get laid out by Omega and Ospreay. Here come more members of the Callis crew, but the Death Riders come out. They join Omega and Ospreay in the ring to keep them at bay. Another episode of Dynamite, another week where I'm not sure if I'm supposed to be cheering for the Death Riders or booing the Death Riders. You have them in the opening match against Cope and Christian playing heels. Same with Claudio and Pac. But here, they're treated like baby faces. This segment was too long. It was like a WWE opening promo segment long, when it really didn't need to be. But it served its purpose, which was to give us our main event for Montreal on the 26th. And so for the third time in less than a year, we have the TNT champion challenging for and losing to the AEW World Champion. And look, there's no shame in losing to the champ, right? That's why they're the world champion, but they don't need to be making a habit out of it. Now, they did this with Kyle Fletcher at All Out last year. He was the TNT champion, right? He wrestled Hangman in the main event for the world title. I didn't even hate it when they did it with Kyle last year. I thought they were telling people by positioning him in the main event, we see main event potential in this man, right? Go out there and sell yourself. Sell yourself to the fans that you belong in this spot. That's essentially what they're doing here. And I mean, there's nothing inherently wrong with that, but it really does feel like a throwaway main event, as in they threw away what should have been the main event in favor of doing a lesser match. I still have not been given a good reason as to why that match was done on television and not saved for Redemption. I don't give a shit if the idea came from MJF himself. He's not a dumb man, right? He knew that it would pop a big rating and he could take credit for it, and it worked. But like in terms of star power, this is an objectively weaker main event on a show that was added very late to the schedule and could use a really strong drawing main event. In ring, I know it's going to be strong. I mean, maybe it might even end up being match of the night, but you can say that about every AEW pay-per-view. I mean, by that logic, just put Kenny Omega against Hechicero in the main event, right? Or Commander. Are we looking, here's what I'm wondering now. I'm looking at this, and it's no longer Kenny going for the championship, trying to get his redemption and get that win back over MJF from Dynasty. They killed that story last week. He got his redemption on Beach Break. Are we looking not at Kenny Omega's redemption now, but Kevin Knight's? Because there were so many mentions in this promo, backstage, in other segments, like when Speedball confronted Kevin Knight, where they were all talking about like the real Kevin Knight, right? And ditching Callis and ditching the Don Callis family. And you still have good in your heart. And I know it's still buried deep down inside you. Is this what we're building to here? It would seem a little quick to break him away from the Callis family, seeing as how he just joined them. But with Omega talking about all this stuff, and again, Speedball confronting him, and I'll be here waiting when the old, Kevin Knight shows up again. Maybe they've pivoted to a Kevin Knight redemption arc. I don't know. I mean, can you really have a redemption after only 2 months? Usually you'd expect it to go a little bit longer than that. He just joined. Is that what we're looking at, though? That's what it feels like to me. Also, how many times must we have champions challenging other champions in this company? This is what happens when everyone has a belt. You end up with endless champion against champion matches. They've announced Kyle Fletcher will be defending the international title at Redemption against Bandito, because Bandito had the gall to interrupt his backstage promo when he was in the middle of speaking. That's how this match came about. That's only a step below Chris Jericho spilling coffee on Kane in the back, leading to a feud between them. Bandito, the Ring of Honor World Champion, who already lost last month to Jon Moxley when he challenged for the Continental title, is now going to lose again to Kyle Fletcher. Kevin Knight is going to be defending his TNT Championship on TBS next week against Darby Allin. They're doing that match on TV next week. And so now that we know he won't be defending it at Redemption, did you know that the TNT Championship has not been defended on a single pay-per-view since Full Gear last year? I'm not counting Dynasty this year because the title was vacant. There was no champion to defend. And it was Kevin Knight, actually, who won the title in a gauntlet match. I'm not counting that. Not a single defense of that title since November on a pay-per-view. For what had been considered the second biggest men's title in the entire company. I mean, maybe it isn't anymore. Jon Moxley's got the Continental title, so that's probably the de facto number 2 men's belt in the company. But for what's supposed to be their second biggest title, that's fucking awful. That is an awful statistic. I mentioned Kyle Fletcher. Hell of a title defense against Commander. Commander has been missing for months due to visa issues that only recently got resolved. I had a lot of fun with this match. So did the crowd. When it was over, Fletcher went to go rip his mask off when Konosuke Takeshita ran out. He attacked Fletcher, and I said, oh, he stuck around. I thought he would be back in Japan by now. Takeshita picked up the international title when Okada ran in and laid him out with a Rainmaker. Okada and Fletcher, they pick up the title at the same time and staring each other down until Brodito hits the ring and takes them both out. And it ends with Bandito holding up the international title. So we're totally getting a 3-way in London with Takeshita, Fletcher, and Okada once Takeshita comes back. Chris Jericho, he issued a challenge to Tommaso Ciampa for a rematch at Redemption after Ciampa threw sand in his eyes to win their first match at Beach Break. He said, Ciampa, you bring the pain. I'll bring the pain maker. And Jericho turned and we saw the pain maker makeup on his, which is, I mean, I say the pain maker makeup, my God. It's a couple of black streaks under his eyes. That's basically the makeup. Or maybe like by the corners of his mouth, I think. It's the most pathetic makeup job. Like there are guys that will really work really hard on the makeup on their face, like Sting would every single week, and he would just be walking out there in a bomber jacket, even when he wasn't wrestling. Hey, he's putting all the makeup on and everything, right? Or Dustin Rhodes. This guy takes a little bit of black makeup here and there. Oh, I'm the pain maker. And he's got the makeup on his face, and he puts that silly, stupid fucking Clockwork Orange hat on, and then he makes a funny face. He looked completely ridiculous. It felt like this was meant to be a parody. I can't take him seriously at this point with that shit on. I just can't. He looks so ridiculous making that face. And they just lingered on him for an uncomfortable amount of time. Darby Allin, he barely survived Brian Cage, but it followed the same formula that every Darby match does. He takes a lot of really stupid bumps, an insane amount of punishment, but then just wins in the end anyway. And Brian Cage continues to be the resident jobber of the Don Callis family, but at least he looks good doing it, right? Dude's as big as I've ever seen him. Darby is challenging Knight this Wednesday for the TNT title. You could have made things interesting. Here's one way you could have made things interesting, by making it non-title and saving that for Wembley, but instead make it a number 1 contenders match where the winner gets the shot at Kenny Omega at Redemption. At least that would have created some intrigue as to the outcome, because you make that match non-title, I think you get a lot of people convinced that Darby's going over. And then when Kevin Knight wins, it kind of takes him off guard a little bit, but at least he earns his way in. Because Kenny was right. He's like, look, MJF made you a promise. I don't give a shit what MJF promised you. You want a shot at the championship, you got to fight for it. You have an issue with one Darby Allin lately. So why don't the two of you fight for it? How come they couldn't set it up that way? I mean, Darby literally came out at the end of that segment anyway, and he attacked Kevin Knight. I think that would have been a better way to go about doing it. They saved the ladies for last, clearly because they were in Boston. And of course, they were going to have Mercedes Moné wrestling in the main event in Boston. It was Mercedes, Megan Bayne, and Lena Cross against Willow Nightingale, Hyon, and Maya World. Now, I didn't watch this live, but apparently this started 6 or 7 minutes into the overrun. Do I have that right? And they still took an ad break in the overrun. I thought the match was fine. My only issue was no Tekla on this show. Willow is challenging Tekla for the title at Redemption. Her team lost to Mercedes and her team, who got the pin on Hyon to win it. And that's how they went off the air. There was stuff to like. There was stuff to dislike. Definitely a step down from Beach Break. But we actually have a card now for Redemption, which looks like one that doesn't need to be happening. This really didn't need to be a pay-per-view. They only have 5,500 tickets out. Maybe a little more than that by now for a show that's a week away. I know they usually do pretty good walk-up sales, but unless they have a massive swing this week, that is not good for a pay-per-view. That is not a good number. Compare that with All In, coming off Omega beating MJF to win the world title. They moved over 4,000 tickets alone this past week to bring the total for Wembley, still with 6 weeks left to go, up over 31,000 tickets sold. That's a lot better. And I said this on TNT the other night. JD thinks that they're going to clear 50,000 for the Wembley show. I think he's nuts. I don't see that at all, but I do think they'll end up around 40,000 or so. I would say probably a little bit over 40K is where I think they'll end up. They did 70-something thousand for the first one. They did 50,000 plus for the second one. 40,000 for this one after they just added 4,000 tickets. That sounds reasonable to me. Here's what Redemption looks like so far. With my predictions, I'm sure they'll be adding more this week. We have the Painmaker, Chris Jericho against Tommaso Ciampa. Ciampa won the first one. Jericho's going to win this one. And I think a power drill is going to come into play here somehow, especially now that this match after Collision last night, as per Tommaso Ciampa, has been made no holds barred. This will be a Jericho win. Just added after Collision last night, Hikaru Shida will defend her TBS championship against Maya World after Maya came to the aid of Queen Aminata, who wrestled Shida last night. I think Maya could be built up to win the TBS title at some point. I'd rather that than the Ring of Honor Women's World title, but it shouldn't happen here. Shida just won the belt. Doesn't feel like the right time to just take it off of her. And I wasn't even enamored with putting the belt on Shida to begin with, but you did it, and so now it just feels like this is not the right time to do a title change. So this should be a Shida win. Adam Copeland and Christian Cage defend their AEW tag team titles against Claudio Castagnoli and Pac. This will be a win for CNC. Kyle Fletcher defends the AEW International title against Bandito. That'll be a retention for Fletcher. Mark Davis defends the AEW National title against Andrade El Idolo. And I'm sorry to say, this is where the reign of Mark Davis comes to an end. Andrade will win the national championship. I wonder if they just go back to Davis and Doyle as a tag team. Also just added, Jon Moxley will team up with Will Ospreay to take on the Young Bucks. This is what all these Moxley and Ospreay team-ups and squashes on TV have been leading to. I believe their first loss. And how does Moxley respond to that? This is going to be the first crack in the armor between Ospreay and the Death Riders. And if the Bucks are being built up for a tag team title match, they shouldn't be losing this anyway, so I'm going with the Bucks for the win. I would think that that's the Wembley match, right? First time ever, the Bucks against CNC, but where might the New Day fit into all of this? They're free agents very soon, possibly as soon as next week, and that's another match that's been bandied about for years, right? The big dream match, the Young Bucks and the New Day. Never seemed like it had any real shot of happening, but it's going to happen. Oh, mark my words, it's going to happen. It's just a matter of when. Tekla will defend the AEW Women's World Championship against Willow Nightingale. I really don't mind if either woman walks away with the title here to defend against Mercedes, but I think it's going to be Willow. I think they're going to go the babyface against heel route. I think it's going to be weird if they do Tekla and Mercedes as the big women's match on that show. It is a match that we haven't seen, though. I'd be pretty keen on seeing it, but I think it's going to be Willow winning the championship here. She won that gauntlet, made her big return. Her team lost this past week on Dynamite. I think she wins the belt. And Kenny Omega defends the AEW World Championship against the Jet, the TNT champion, Kevin Knight. They've sold 31,000 tickets and counting for that Wembley show, and a good chunk of those late sales are because Kenny Omega has been announced to wrestle Will Ospreay in the main event. Kevin Knight will not be jetting to the main event at Wembley Stadium. And we'll see if this turns out to be a redemption arc for him. Do they flip him right back to being babyface? I mean, if it is, they're speed running through a redemption arc for Kevin Knight. I'm not quite sure that would make a lot of sense. But that was the feeling I got coming out of that Dynamite show on Wednesday.